Rudolf Mössbauer died at his home on September 14 of last year. In 1961, he won the Nobel Prize in Physics at age 32 for the discovery of the effect named after him. He was born on January 31, 1929 in Munich, Germany. He was a talented piano player, but decided to study physics at the Technical University of Munich, which was then called the Technische Hochschule. He received his doctorate degree under Professor Heinz Meyer-Leibniz in 1958. Since the Technical University was overcrowded with students, he carried out his experiments at the Max Planck Institute for Experimental Medicine at Heidelberg. After graduating, he continued his work for another 2 years as an assistant at the Technical University. During his experiments, he observed for the first time what is now called the Mössbauer effect. In his research, Mössbauer studied resonance fluorescence from nuclei. Resonance fluorescence is well known for atoms. Atoms emit light at spectral lines, which are determined by the surrounding bound electrons and are characteristic for each atomic species. Resonant radiation can be absorbed by atoms of the same species, but not by different atoms. It was expected that this method of resonance fluorescence would be much more selective for nuclei. The frequencies of gamma rays emitted by long-living nuclei are determined much more precisely than the frequencies of light emitted by bound electrons, and they're usually much higher. A problem arises because each gamma ray photon transfers a small amount of recoil momentum to the nucleus. This changes the gamma ray frequency by a tiny amount. Though very small, the change is large enough so that the radiation can no longer be absorbed by another nucleus. Rudolf Mössbauer tried to observe resonance fluorescence with iridium-191 nuclei by heating both source and absorber to broaden the lines. However, the effect was very small. When he cooled both samples, he expected the signal to disappear because the line would become even narrower. However, he observed a stronger signal at lower temperature. The explanation comes from quantum physics. For a certain fraction of atoms dependent on temperature, the gamma recoil momentum is taken up by all the atoms in a crystal, not by an individual nucleus. The crystal acts like an immovable rock from which the gamma photon can jump away, so that the frequency change due to recoil becomes negligible. The observation of nuclear resonance fluorescence enabled by this effect is known as Mössbauer spectroscopy. This technique makes it possible to observe small changes in energy down to 1/1000th of an electron volt compared to a gamma ray energy of perhaps 100,000 electron volts. This precision enables countless applications in physics and chemistry. To give a few examples, in chemical analysis, one can not only determine the atomic species of a sample, but also the kinds of chemical bonds. In biochemistry, this can be used to elucidate the structure and function of iron-containing enzymes. In technical chemistry, it has been possible to clarify the function of different catalysts. And among the most interesting applications in fundamental physics are precision tests of Albert Einstein's theories of special and general relativity. Already in 1959, Pound and Repka used the Mössbauer effect to observe the redshift of gamma photons in the gravitational field of the Earth. On the initiative of Richard Feynman, Rudolf Mössbauer went to the California Institute of Technology in 1960, and he was a professor there from 1962 until he returned to the Technical University of Munich in 1964. There, following the US model, he introduced non-hierarchical department structures. Numerous new academic positions were created, and new directions of research became possible. These measures contributed significantly to the reputation of physics in Munich. In the late 1970s, Mössbauer turned his attention to neutrino physics. Neutrinos are, for instance, produced in the nuclear reactions that generate the energy of the sun. It had been observed that much fewer neutrinos arrive on Earth than was to be expected from the radiated energy. Some physicists speculated that the nuclear reactions powering the sun may have stopped and that we are only witnessing some kind of afterglow. A rather far-fetched explanation was the assumption that the neutrinos are changing into some other elementary particle on their way from Sun to Earth. Mössbauer tried to observe the transmutation of neutrinos from a nuclear reactor without observing any effect. Also, these experiments were belittled by quite a few colleagues. He was fundamentally correct. We know today that neutrino oscillations occur. However, the effect is so small that it was not feasible for Mössbauer to observe it with the techniques available to him. Since then, the effect has been confirmed at large underground neutrino observatories. The experiments led to a Nobel Prize for Raymond Davis and Masatoshi Koshibe. The journal Nature writes in its obituary, Mössbauer saw science as a language connecting all the people in the world. He started many international collaborations, and during the Cold War, he was one of the first to organize seminars with Soviet physicists long before this became feasible for US colleagues. Rudolf Mössbauer was a charismatic and inspiring academic teacher. His legendary lectures may have motivated quite a few students to choose the Technical University of Munich for their studies of physics. Despite his high reputation, Rudolf Mössbauer always remained a friendly and modest individual. In this way, he continues to inspire many of us as a role model.